Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to breathe free. This once proud motto embodied America's unique role as a melting pot of the world, a beacon of hope and prosperity that allowed anyone, without restriction to culture, race, or religion, to enter a land of opportunity in search of the American dream. However, over the last few decades, with the fear of terrorism at an all-time high and the perception that cheap immigrant labor is saturating the workforce, America has since retracted its open invitation to the world. Although the United States might still be considered a racial melting pot of sorts, America is much more homogeneous in its religious views than its cultural diversity. Down from 86% in 1990 to 76% in 2008, Christianity remains the dominant religion of the United States, with only 1% of the population identifying themselves as Jews and 0.6% as Muslim. The widespread belief in Christianity correlates to the large number of Americans that reject evolution. According to a survey conducted by CBS in 2005, 51% of Americans believe God created man in his present form. In a poll of industrialized countries on their belief of evolution, America ranked as one of the least, second only to Turkey, in the acceptance of evolution as truth. Many Western nations, such as those belonging to the European Union, are adopting a more secular form of government, which actually celebrates the discoveries that have advanced the concept of evolution. To the contrary, the United States is becoming increasingly more isolated, both politically and intellectually, as it closes its borders and moves toward a more conservative society, where American legislation is influenced by religious beliefs and a majority of its citizens hold the view any scientific evidence that conflicts with biblical doctrine must be entirely rejected. Meet Sylvia Allen, a Republican senator from Arizona. Allen happens to be a Christian, and her duty as an elected official is to vote on laws that represent her views and those of her constituency. Recently, Senator Allen presided over a hearing on the mining of Arizona's uranium reserves.
This Earth's been here 6,000 years, and I know I'm going on and on, I'll shut up. It's been here 6,000 years, long before anybody had environmental laws, and somehow it hasn't been done away with. And we need to get the uranium here in Arizona so this state can get the money from it.
Senator Allen is on record professing the world to be 6,000 years old, which is contrary to the scientific understanding of a 4.5 billion-year-old Earth and a 13.7 billion-year-old universe. If not from a science book, then from what source has Senator Allen and other like-minded Americans received information the Earth is so much younger than the view collectively shared among the world's scientific community? Christians that believe in a young Earth are proponents of a literal understanding of the Bible. Often identified as evangelical creationists, their beliefs are not only at odds with the scientific understanding of the natural world, but also with other Christians that hold the view the Bible can and should be interpreted. Advocates of interpretation do not believe the Bible is the direct, literal Word of God, but instead a collection of manuscripts, themselves having been translated and transcribed as they were passed down through the millennia. This view not only encourages interpretation of the Scriptures, but actually claims interpretation is necessary in order to correctly understand the greater meaning behind the figurative stories collected within these texts. Christians that accept the evidence of an old earth often cite 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 8, which says, "With the Lord a day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years are like a day." There's a similar quote in Psalm 90, verse 4 that reads, "For 1,000 years in your sight are like a day that has just gone by, all like a watch in the night." These passages show the word day is used in many different contexts throughout the Bible. However, creationists argue that in both 2 Peter chapter 3 and in Psalm 90, the context is that God is not limited by natural processes. Neither verse refers to the specific days of creation in Genesis, for these passages are dealing with the boundless qualities of God. Instead, creationists look to the book of Exodus, where can be found a specific reference to the days of creation. Exodus chapter 20, verse 9 through 10 states, "You have 6 days in which to do your work, but the seventh day is a day of rest, dedicated to me. God's justification for the definition of the work week is given in verse 11. For in 6 days I, the Lord, made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them, but on the seventh day I rested. That is why I, the Lord, blessed the Sabbath and made it holy. When God gives his fourth commandment to Moses in Exodus chapter 20, verse 8 through 12, we see a direct, literal reference to the creation week in Genesis 1. This is clearly evident by the direct, literal tone in which God conveys all his commands. God makes no figurative or allegorical references in his 6th, 7th, and 8th commandments, which tell us not to commit murder, adultery, or theft, respectively. Therefore, creationists apply the same logic to the 4th commandment that instructs us to keep the Sabbath day holy, where the creation week is exemplified in the work week. Creationists believe that if we are to follow God's example, the definition of the work week in Exodus chapter 20 is the same length of time it took to create the universe in Genesis chapter 1. Taking into account that a day is a literal day, creationists are able to determine the age of the universe and the earth by tracing several genealogies found in the Old Testament. So, let's also briefly trace these genealogies to see what we find, and please, feel free to follow along with your copy of the Bible. In Genesis chapter 5, verse 3 through 32, we learn of the genealogy from Adam to Noah's son Shem. If we add the age of each man when his son was born, we will find there is 1,556 years from Adam to Shem. In Genesis chapter 11, verse 11 through 26, we learn of the genealogy from Shem to Abraham. Again, if we add the age of each man when his son was born, we will find there is 390 years from Shem to Abraham. When added to our previous total, we arrive at 1,946 years after the creation. In Genesis chapter 12, verse 4, we pick up the story of Abraham. So Abraham left, as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abraham was 75 years old when he set out from Haran. In Genesis chapter 15, verse 18, God makes a covenant with Abraham, giving his people the promised land. On that day the Lord made a covenant with Abraham and said, "To your descendants I give this land, from the river of Egypt to the great river the Euphrates." In Exodus chapter 12, verse 41, we learn the Israelites left Egypt to enter the promised land 430 years after God spoke to Abraham. In 1 Kings chapter 6, verse 1, we see the building of Solomon's temple. In the 480th year after the Israelites had come out of Egypt, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel, in the month of Ziv, the 2nd month, he began to build the temple of the Lord. Therefore, when Solomon was building the temple, it had been 480 years since the Exodus led by Moses. Most biblical scholars agree in the year 960 BC Solomon completed the temple. However, if you have any doubt about this date, I urge you to do some research for yourself. Finally, we arrive at the birth of Christ. Therefore, from God's covenant with Abraham to Jesus' birth, there was 1,945 years. Added to our previous total, we arrive at 3,891 years from the creation of Adam to the birth of Christ. If we add the present date to this total, we arrive at the age of the universe, which, in 2009, is 5,900 years old. As we can see, a literal interpretation of the Bible does indeed lead one to perceive the earth to be 750,000 times younger than what the natural evidence claims. In order to maintain this view, creationists attack the instruments and the scientific methods used to date the earth, but the evangelical perception of reality conflicts with much more than just radiometric dating. For instance, light travels throughout the universe at a constant speed of 3 × 10⁸ meters per second. So vast is our universe, it takes light billions of years to travel across the cosmos, light which the Hubble telescope has captured in these beautiful images. Therefore, if the universe was really younger than 6,000 years, we should not even be able to see the next closest spiral galaxy, Andromeda, which is a mere 2 million light-years away. In addition, scientists that study the formation of geological phenomena, such as the Grand Canyon and Mount Everest, observe very slowly occurring processes, estimated to have taken many millions of years. And there is also the problem with the countless numbers of fossils, ranging from the great variety of dinosaurs to even other species of humans, which creationists attempt to explain by manipulating the scientific evidence to conform with their preconceived notions of divine creation. The need for Christian fundamentalists to fight against scientific evidence is of such importance to their system of belief because, as we will examine in the next episode, to them the purpose of Christ hinges on the validity of original sin and the fact that no animal life could have died before humans existed to inflict a curse of death and corruption upon the entire world.